Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Lacalandra. I'm a client success executive from Goliath Technologies, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar today on how to automate your way to a better Citrix user experience. Before we get started, if anyone has any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat or the Q&A section. We'll do our best to get to every one of them before the end of today's call. And also at the conclusion of today's call, you'll also receive a quick survey about today's content. So we would really appreciate it if everyone could fill that out and let us know how we're doing. So I want to start off by just going through a quick agenda of today's content. As we said, we're going to talk about how to automate your Citrix user experience, and we're going to be talking specifically about one of our customers on how they were able to use Goliath's technology to be able to proactively monitor, troubleshoot, and automate their Citrix user experience. As we said just prior, if you do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the Q&A or the chat. And one question that we always do get is, will this recording be available? It will. You will receive a recording within 24 hours of today's call in your inbox. So as we mentioned, the theme of today's webinar is embedded intelligence and automation. And I really want to start off by telling a story about one of our customers. And this customer is Penn National Insurance, who's an insurance company located, we're headquartered out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And Penn National came to Goliath about 3 years ago, and they came to us because they were having several challenges with IT. They were using Citrix, and they were deploying iGel thin clients to those to Citrix Zen Desktop, as well as Cisco soft phones to help improve their work from home or BYOD initiative. Unfortunately, that deployment came along with many challenges and in fact stalled the rollout of both iGel and Cisco because of all the complaints that their end users and problems their end users were experiencing. So we have them listed here. These are probably not uncommon to many people on this call who support users that are using Citrix or iGel or Cisco. They were having users complain about general slowness and laggy screen within their session. They had long log-on times, and then with those Cisco soft phones, having drop calls. And as I mentioned, this was part of a BYOD and work from home initiative as well too. So, you know, end users, unfortunately for IT, expect the same user experience, whether they're working from home, whether they're working from a Starbucks, or whether they're on a plane. And at the time, Penn National had no way to proactively monitor and correlate any of the data to actually find what the root cause was. So this unfortunately caused finger pointing between departments. People were blaming Citrix, people were blaming iGel, and unfortunately, IT was losing credibility. So this really brings us into the case for embedded intelligence and automation and why it's necessary for anyone that is using Citrix or maybe iGel or Cisco soft phone. So maybe this use case resonates with you. So when we talk about Citrix and any other platforms, it's a very difficult one to be able to support because unfortunately, it's very complex. Citrix has to rely on a number of different vendors, a number of different IT elements to be able to deliver a good user experience to your end users. And with that, there is a real complexity with the delivery infrastructure. And unfortunately, and this is again no fault of IT, there are just not a lot of Citrix experts or VMware Horizon experts. There are other products in the market that have scripting libraries that require a lot of expertise, and many people are doing manual tasks versus proactive automation. So when we talk about embedded intelligence and automation and what you're getting and what you're going to see as part of today's demonstration and use case, you'll see the ability to automatically discover the entire Citrix infrastructure and all of the underlying elements, the ability to monitor for hundreds of events, conditions, or failure points, and be able to proactively alert you to any thresholds or failure points that have been breached, the ability to correlate data and benchmark data on user experience, test and ensure your applications are available, and even deploy self-healing actions to automate your user experience. And with IT, when a user places a support ticket, it typically boils down to three main areas, and you'll see those on the left side. And again, anyone that's on today's call, you've probably received a ticket from an end user in one of these three areas. You have logon initiation, so users that are unable to connect to their to Citrix, to their applications. You have logon duration, like we talked about with Penn National, users that are having logon times upwards of 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. The users that get up and grab a cup of coffee when their Citrix logs on for the day. And then those that have session performance. So whether it's a laggy screen or just freezes or drops, that can be incredibly frustrating for any end user. And the challenge for IT is that any one of these three areas can be caused by 50, hundreds of different problems that manifest within and the IT infrastructure. And with Goliath, with our embedded intelligence and automation, right out of the box, we're going to be automatically looking for all of these different events, conditions, and failure points, like the user's home network, like the user's profile and their group policies, like the bandwidth utilization for the end user. And we're bringing those to you in a single pane of glass to make troubleshooting easier and actually give IT the ability to be proactive. So we've talked about embedded intelligence and automation. We're going to continue to talk about that, but let's get back to the story and the use case at hand, which is Penn National Insurance. And let's talk a little bit more in depth about the issues they were having and how our technology was able to quickly solve those. So when we talk about what we were able to do at Penn National, within 2 hours, we were able to deploy our technology. We were able to automatically discover the entire Citrix infrastructure, create a Citrix dependency map, apply hundreds of embedded intelligence and monitors across their infrastructure, and be able to proactively alert them, collect metrics, and populate dashboards and reports so that they can have a clear and unbiased representation of user experience. And in today's use case, we're going to focus on the three main use cases that Penn National has and how they're able to use Goliath's product. So troubleshooting and documenting the root cause. So we talked about users having drop calls or slowness in their session. We're going to go through how Penn National was able to use Goliath to be able to pinpoint home Wi-Fi that was poor. We'll talk about satellite connections from various locations that were unsupported. And we'll talk about how Penn National was able to use Goliath's automatic discovery and dependency map to map out their infrastructure and show them exactly where their problems are and where their problems are not. And before we actually show you the technology, Penn National did tell us, and we want to show these quotes for a reason, that Goliath was able to help them restore confidence in IT. And we'll hope to be able to show you a good example of what that means. So what we're looking at now is Goliath Technologies' automatic discovery and dependency map for Citrix, or what many people refer to as a topology view. Now, many of you that are on today's call may have seen a topology before. in other products or other technologies, they're typically network focused. What makes this unique is that this is the only Citrix topology view that is automatically mapped out to show the different dependencies and relationships between not only your delivery infrastructure, but also your machine catalogs, your golden image, and your hypervisor hosts all in one view. And what's really unique about this is that we're applying all of that embedded intelligence and automation to this view automatically upon deployment. So all those different monitors that are looking for those events, conditions, and failure points are applied to these different IT elements, and automatically these elements would start to change colors based on the conditions that are being found automatically by Goliath. So let's go back to Penn National and how they're able to use this. So each morning when they log into the technology, this is the first place they go. They have this up on a knock screen in their data center, and they're able to see in one single view the health of their Citrix delivery infrastructure. So they're able to see their storefront servers. They're able to see their delivery controllers and any back-end components that are part of that infrastructure. So maybe the licensing server, the hypervisor connection, or SQL, all in one view. And if you click on any of these different elements, it maps out and shows the dependencies for each of these different elements. So you're able to see how the storefront server works in conjunction with the delivery controller, and how the delivery controller is able to broker sessions by also contacting the licensing server and the hypervisor host and SQL, and how all of these IT elements have to work in conjunction to provide a good user experience. Now, if at any point, like we mentioned, there's been a critical alert or something proactively found on any of these different elements, they would turn orange, yellow, or red based on the severity of that alert, and you would be able to see them right here on the right side of the screen. It would show you exactly what's going on. So maybe there's a broker service alert on your delivery controller, or maybe there's hundreds of users at a certain point of time that are not able to connect into Citrix, and they're having connection failures. You would see that here. You'd be able to see that populate here on this dashboard below. What you'd also be able to see is concurrent users and sessions. If we had multiple Citrix environments, you can toggle between those different environments. Any one of these components, you can click on them. You can see a health check and also view real-time resource utilization. So I can see that my delivery controller is at 80% memory right now, for example. And this is just one view. What Penn National is also able to do is they're able to click into their delivery layer, and they're able to see all the different delivery groups. So I can, again, see if I have issues with any of my delivery groups, I can click on them, and it's going to build out a machine catalog all the way down to the hypervisor cluster. And while it's doing that, show you real-time user experience metrics per delivery group. So I can see things like ICA latency and round trip time and connection speed per delivery group. And I can even see any alerts that are going on in this delivery group. So I can hover over this one, and I can see that this specific user event log was triggered, and I can see that it's a specific group policy error, and I can even see the user's name that was impacted. So as we mentioned, this is the first step that Penn National takes in the morning. They're able to understand the overall health of their Citrix environment, having this up on a knock view, and again, showing them where they need to look and where they don't need to look, and then they can plan their day accordingly afterwards. Now everything's green that you're seeing right here at this point in time, but when there are issues, you would see those bottle up here, or you can also receive a real-time alert from our technology that maybe a user is experiencing slowness within their session. And in Penn National's case, this was happening very often when they were deploying iGel and Cisco soft phones. So what they were able to do is, once they're able to view the health of the environment, if they receive an alert about a user having a poor performance, they're able to flip over to our Citrix virtual apps and desktops, real-time and historical session display. So in one view, you're able to see all of your Citrix sessions, not only real-time, but historically as well too. We do keep our data historically, and we do not average or roll up any of the data. So for example, we're showing you data from the last 6 weeks. So I can see all of my user sessions for the last 6 weeks. I can see those with high logon times, with high latency. I can see what device they use. So maybe they were using a MacBook, maybe they were using iGel in the case of Penn National. And I can quickly find any user session by using the quick filter. So I can type in a user's name and I can find all of their sessions for the past 6 weeks. And with that embedded intelligence and automation, I'm able to see right away whether a user had a long logon time, or maybe they were experiencing latency within their session because everything is color coded. So everything's green right now. But again, if these were above a certain threshold, it would automatically pull your attention to that, and you would be able to see that this specific user was experiencing a long logon or latency. So to get back into our use case, when we talked about how Penn National was able to use Goliath to be able to pinpoint that home Wi-Fi was the root cause of issues and had nothing to do with iGel, Cisco, or even Citrix. So all those complaints they were getting from end users talking about Citrix or iGel or Cisco didn't have anything to do with what the actual root cause was. And they were able to use Goliath to be able to pinpoint that root cause. They were able to quickly find a user session by typing in their name. And then when they click on their name, they're able to pull up every part of the user experience for that user for that particular session. So the session that we're looking at right now is from 5 days ago, but it could have been 5 weeks ago, and we would get the same amount of detail here. And what you're able to see are the machine name that the client used, their path, so how they connected in. Was it through the NetScaler? Was it through the storefront server? So it'll tell you whether this is an internal or external user. In the case of Penn National, they were seeing that all of these were external users. They're able to see the delivery controller, the VDI server or XenApp host, the hypervisor host for that particular user. And then on the bottom, they're able to see things like ICA round trip time, network latency, so how the network was impacting the session, the performance of the data center. And what's really unique about Goliath, they were actually able to see the amount of connection that user had from their location. And this is all here on the summary tab. However, in order to get a really deep and granular look at their user's experience, they were able to use this ICA and HDX channel right here. So once we flip over to ICA and HDX, we're able to see things like ICA latency. We're able to see things like network latency and round trip time all in one view. You can click on these and you can hide the different values. So say if I just want to see what round trip time looked like for that user, I can just see round trip time. I can hover over that and I can see these data interpretation lines. So when going back to embedded intelligence, we're telling you exactly what good performance is and what poor performance is by these data interpretation lines. So going back to this use case, this specific user, I was notified that they were having poor performance. I'm able to come in, I'm able to see and confirm that yes, the round trip time, which is the time it takes for a user to either click a mouse or type in a keyboard for that to be displayed onto their screen. And we have that all defined for you right here in the technology. I was able to see that their round trip time was at its highest at 10:56 in the morning. It was 524 milliseconds, which is more than double of what it should be for a good user experience. I'm able to see the performance of the network and how the network was impacting their performance. And I'm also able to see that ICA latency metrics as well too. So based on what I'm looking at here, I'm able to pinpoint very quickly that ICA round trip time was high, and at the same exact time, network latency was at its peak as well too. So I can automatically point to the fact that the network was the issue. And in Penn National's case, they took it a step further. So we understand that the network was the bottleneck here, has nothing to do with the performance of the VDI, Citrix. They were able to focus their efforts specifically on network performance, and they use this connection speed and bandwidth data point here in Goliath to understand what exactly the performance was like for that user session. Now, when we say connection speed, I can hover over this here. I can see much like round trip time, what is a good connection and what's a poor connection. And connection speed is the amount of bandwidth, or more specifically, the download speed that this specific user has for Citrix from their location. So we talked about Penn National having users working from home. So this is, in essence, the download speed for that user's home Wi-Fi. And we're able to see the performance of the Wi-Fi for the entirety of their session. And we talked about at 10:56, we saw that round trip time was at its highest. We can now trend that user's connection speed, and I can see it started at about 25 megabits, which is good, which is above what the threshold is. And we can see a massive drop in connection speed at 10:55, which just so happens to correlate with the high spike in round trip time. So I can right away point the finger to the user's connection at home as being the root cause. And Penn National was able to use this information. They were able to proactively call the end user. And once they got on the phone with the end user, they were able to determine that not only was that user working from home, but his wife was also working from home. And again, this is going on through COVID, so a lot of people are working from home. And their son was also taking school from home. So there were a lot of other elements at home, a lot of other users hogging the network bandwidth. And unfortunately, there was not enough bandwidth for that user to support their Citrix session. It was just about 3.5 megabits of connection, which is pretty much dial-up speed. So in just a couple of clicks, they were able to point to the user's home Wi-Fi connection as being the root cause. Now, the other example we talked about was satellite and from remote locations not being supported. So this is a very similar use case to people working from home. We're able to see the performance of the network or the Wi-Fi from a specific location. So one of the other use cases was users working from a satellite location, and once again complaining about slowness, complaining about drop calls with their Cisco soft phones. So not only are we able to see the connection for that specific user, and we can see that the connection is poor here, but we're also able to see this bandwidth metric here. And bandwidth out is showing you the total amount of bandwidth that this user is consuming during their session. So we talked about how users were using Cisco soft phones. So this is going to show you the amount of bandwidth that specific user was using within their session. And we talked about, again, Cisco soft phones. And we can see here that at that same time at 10:56, this user was consuming about 2 megabits worth of bandwidth, which may not be a problem in a lot of cases. However, when you only have about 3.5 available to you, then that is a real problem. So we can point to that as being also contributing to the fact that this user was having problems. Now, being able to see the totality of bandwidth utilization is great, but Goliath, unlike any other technology, is able to actually break out the different bandwidth channels that each individual user is accessing throughout their session. So with Cisco soft phones, they're going to be accessing audio. You may be accessing video. And with the way Citrix is architected, all of these different elements need different virtual channels to be able to present on the screen for the end user. So we would look at the ICA channel usage here in the bottom left here, and we're able to see an accurate depiction of the different virtual channels that this end user was accessing during their session. So we were able to see things like thin wire bandwidth. And you can see it's defined here that anything for thin wire bandwidth over 1200 kilobits per second is video, most likely. We can see bandwidth for the audio, both in and out. So I can see that this user was talking into their session. And what we're able to determine from here is that thin wire bandwidth was being utilized heavily throughout the course of the session, up over 2 megabits worth of connection throughout the entirety of their session. So going back to what we talked about before, at 10:56, round trip time was high. I can also see at that same exact time, this user was using thin wire bandwidth in excess of 1.5 to 2 megabits worth of connection. So the conclusion here is that Penn National was able to call this end user once again. They were able to determine they were working at a remote location. They already understand that the network performance was poor at this location. And they were also able to talk to the end user and ask him, well, what were you doing during your session? And he said, well, I was making calls on my soft phone. And we were able to see that manifest itself under thin wire bandwidth. And we were able to see that the user was consuming nearly as much bandwidth as they actually had available. So it was a two-part problem. It was the user's connection was poor, and the fact that they were trying to access bandwidth and use bandwidth that just simply wasn't available to them. And with all of this, again, they were able to use this data to be able to automatically correlate issues and being able to solve them in real time and have productive conversations with their end users. They were able to restore credibility to their IT department. But what they were also able to do is track and trend data and performance over time by using Goliath's data and analytics and reporting. So this is just one example of a report that is available that the folks at Penn National was able to use. They're able to show the overall user experience score for their user base. They're able to break out what the user's connection was, their network latency, their round trip time. They're able to see each individual user here. So in the case of Penn National, they're able to point to right away that a user's connection speed over the past week or the past month was poor, and they're able to, again, call those end users, have productive conversations, and really point the finger in the right direction, which, again, had nothing to do with iGel, Cisco, or even Citrix. And that's really the conclusion of today's demonstration. And we'd love to take some questions. Before we take any questions, I know everyone has a slide like this, but the point of this slide is really to show you that our technology is able to scale to some of the largest Citrix environments in the world, and has the ease of use and price point to work with small and medium-sized business as well. So I see that now I'm catching up that we have a number of different questions that have come in over the course of the webinar, and thank you everyone again for your time today and for your questions. So we can get to those questions right now. The first question, how do you know what to monitor and at what thresholds? It's a really good question, and that really speaks to the embedded intelligence of the technology making up for a lot of the shortage of expertise in the industry. So the good news is that you don't have to know. The technology is going to automatically know what to monitor and how to monitor it. So the technology ships automatically with different thresholds and monitors that are going to be looking across the infrastructure. And all those thresholds and monitors come preset so that based upon Citrix best practices from our time as a consulting company working with different Citrix CTPs. So you really don't have to know any of that. Second question, do you automatically alert based upon threshold triggers before a user is impacted? Absolutely. So going back to that automatic discovery and dependency map that we have for Citrix. That is going to show us the overall health of the Citrix infrastructure and send us a proactive alert that can sometimes prohibit for a user actually being impacted. So the answer to that question is yes. Third question. Thank you, everyone. This is great. Do you have automatic remediation actions that can be executed? Absolutely. Every one of the different monitors, while it comes with a pre-built threshold and trigger, those can all be can all perform different remediation actions within the technology. So, for example, say you have a specific process that you know consumes a lot of memory or CPU. Our technology is able to automatically restart that process upon hitting a threshold. Maybe a Windows service goes down. Our technology can also restart that Windows service automatically. What we can also do is any scripting can be done throughout those monitoring rules as well too, which actually brings me to the next question, which is you don't require scripts, but they do have their use case. Can you use scripts with your product? And the answer is yes. We're able to use any PowerShell script or batch file. Any scripting that you use can be done within the technology, and we are able to integrate those with our monitoring to perform actions automatically that are maybe a little bit more complex. Is your database in the cloud or on premises? So our technology, just to give an overview of the infrastructure, it is a 2-server architecture. So you have a Goliath server and you have a dedicated Goliath database that can be either part of a cluster or standalone, and it can be either on premises or in AWS or Azure. So we support both. Are historical reports part of the same product, or are they or another logon required? Great question. Everything's in one console. That's what makes this really great. And I can actually flip over to the reporting section right now. You can see here that all the reports are in one product. All the data from a historical standpoint is available to you. We make it really easy to find the reports that you'd like. We can segment them out by performance monitoring, by Citrix. We can report on any alert or event log as well too. And we make it really easy to grab your data both real time and historically. One more question. Do you offer a fully hosted monitoring as a service? The answer to that question is yes. Everything you've seen today can be offered as a service and as a managed service. So Goliath will host the server and the application and use the application and provide reports both real time and historically. And I see we did have a question, another question come in. Is an agent required at the endpoint to monitor the client-side network? That's a great question. And the answer is no. An agent is not required at the endpoint to be able to get that client-side network information. Because of the way Citrix is architected, we don't need to put an agent on the endpoint. The agent, in fact, goes on either the XenApp server or the VDI server in your data center based on the way Citrix is architected. So we're able to get that information by how the receiver or workspace communicates with that server in your data center, and we're able to present the information that way. So does not require any technology or endpoint, or I'm sorry, agent on the endpoint. All right, and that looks like the last question that we had. So I want to thank everyone once again for your time this afternoon. Like we said at the top of the call, you will receive a survey at the conclusion of today's webinar. So we would really appreciate it if you would fill that out. Let us know how we did. And if you have any other questions, you can obviously ask the questions on the survey. So thank you once again for everyone else for joining today's webinar. I hope we were able to accurately tell a story about how one of our customers was able to use automation and embedded intelligence to be able to really augment their Citrix user experience. Thank you, everyone.